Thank you so much, Mr. Okpewolo, for joining us. All right, so it's quite interesting that Nigeria is moving away from concessional funding now, but then how viable is its domestic revenue mobilization plan?
Oh, I'll tell you, it's very viable. Africa is a big continent, and the world is shifting to Africa. And the role that Nigeria plays in Africa. We are the biggest in terms of economy in Africa, and I think it's time. The government has said it's time for us, not just for us to seek funding, but this time we should go out and reach out to private sector equity players that want to invest in Africa. They have seen that Africa is one of the world's best kept secret, and we can't keep asking for debt equity. Now we want to give them a chance to play in our economy, and so that we can raise revenue. If we can attract foreign direct investment and we are able to create employment, we have a large purchasing power, don't forget that. Our GDP is set to grow by 70%. If we are able to maintain what the government is already doing now, where our loan to GDP ratio has come down, then the sky's our limit. We're doing better than many other African countries, if you ask me.
You're talking about how big Nigeria is, but then, I mean, when you look at Nigeria's total public debt, which is projected to reach about 187.8 trillion naira in 2025, that's also, humongous, if you would agree with me. And some economists are saying that, seeking other means should have been done earlier than now, as Nigeria is now being exposed to external pressures. What do you think about that postulation?
I think the problem in Nigeria is low income. Our problem is low income. The level of income that comes into Nigeria is low. But in all industries, we're doing well. Of course, there are other ways we can make our economy better. If, for example, if the oil prices, if the leakages in the oil sector are curbed, if we can reduce oil theft, the economy is going to do well. If we can also harness the potentials in other sectors, we can't continue to rely on oil. We've been saying this, that over-reliance on oil is detrimental to the Nigerian economy. We've been saying this for years, but we cannot continue to pay lip service to that. We are not doing badly. If you check the numbers from the previous year and what we're doing now, you tell that Nigeria is able to make savings, and we're able to deploy some of our savings into infrastructural projects that will attract foreign investment. We've taken away fuel subsidy. Painful, but I think it's a step in the right direction. We're beginning to gain investors' confidence, and they're beginning to come back. It might not translate into immediate gains, but I will tell you that the word on the street from the World Bank, IMF spring meetings is that Nigeria is on the right path. Foreign direct investments will start flowing very soon. It might take some time, but it's coming. These investors are also watching. They want to see how long we can sustain these policies. They don't want the situation where policies are being made, we're on the right track, and for some reason, maybe due to political pressures, these policies are reversed. No, they're taking the time to see, and very soon the results will continue to start flowing in.
Okay. Permit me to ask this question. Now, the International Monetary Fund has thrown its weight behind Nigeria's efforts to borrow more funds, just as it is saying it should stay the course on its reforms. And it is saying that if Nigeria does that, it will be able to meet its financial needs, and probably offset its debts, so to speak, while rejigging the economy. But then Nigeria is now shying away from those concessionary loan, so to speak. But a lot of people would ask the question, why would international institutions like IMF feel comfortable to continuously lend money to an heavily indebted African country? I mean, you're in the financial space. Maybe an understanding will help us have, an idea of what the mindset or how these mechanics work.
Yeah. As a banker, you give loans to your customers, to make them feel comfortable and to avoid their business to avoid a situation where their business will collapse, because if it collapses, it's going to be the economic effect is going to be bad. For example, Nigeria is a very large player, like I said, in not just in Africa, in West Africa and all over. So if we are not doing the things, and if we're not doing things right, the IMF will not be comfortable borrowing us money. And imagine where the ripple effect, if the crisis, will crystallize into something that's bigger than what it is right now. We play a very critical role in West Africa. Imagine if our economy collapses, migration issues, social instability, ripple effect on the other economies in Africa as well. So they're comfortable giving loans to us because we are doing the right things. We're able to pay. Before you give loans, you make sure that the person or whoever, the entity you're giving loans to, is capable of paying back those loans. And we have been able to do that over the years. We're even in a better position right now than we were a couple of years ago. We're able to save money. We have a lot of savings now from these funds that would have been going to fuel subsidy, And don't forget that we've kind of floated the Naira now in Nigeria, where we don't have to spend a lot of precious money, hard-earned money, to stabilize the Naira. The pains right now, like I said, are enormous, especially on the poor Nigerians or on the middle class. But with time, it's going to even out. They are comfortably giving us money because we're doing the right things and we're meeting the conditions. And not just to say that we are less of a sovereign nation because we are, will I say, maybe dancing to the tune of the World Bank or IMF. No, that's not wrong. That's not correct, I beg your pardon. But that is the general perception out there, that we are dancing to the tune of the World Bank. But again, if you look at it on the brighter side, if we didn't take loans when we did, we would have been in a much, much, much worse situation. Right now, we are okay. We know when not to take loans, even if they are handing us money, because we are creditworthy. Thank you.
Okay. Now let's look at the alternatives. Now we're talking about tax reforms, asset optimization, and all. Let's start with the tax reforms. If it were to be these tax reforms that, of course, have been approved by the National Assembly, what change in terms of financial terms now do you think it will bring for Nigeria? And are there issues that the Nigerian government will need to consider in order to ensure that it generates as much as the kind of revenue it is estimating or hoping for with these tax reform bills?
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm not a tax expert, but I can tell you that I have listened to those arguments about the tax reforms, and I think that it will be good for Nigeria in the long run. For example, it's going to shield small businesses and low-income earners from spending it's going to shield them from spending hard-earned money paying taxes, right? And with the bigger ones, yes, unfortunately, they might have to pay more taxes. But then, the reforms in itself are meant to widen the tax net, not necessarily increasing the tax rate, widen the tax net, block leakages. And of course, if we are able to grow our internally generated revenue, with widening the tax net, why do we need to borrow so much? Look at the taxes in other African countries, averagely about 18%. But what's Nigeria doing? 7.5%.
Yeah.
Everybody's screaming. It's not that bad, but because we are not used to paying taxes, then it becomes a problem. And again, there's public trust. There's an issue of public trust. An average Nigerian does not believe that his or her taxes will be deployed for social benefits. If you still have to buy food very expensive, you have to pay for transportation very expensive, buy gas expensive, then you may not want to trust the system. If healthcare is not available, basic education is not available, quality basic education is not available to the common Nigerian, then you will not have some kind of trust in the system. So we need to improve the public trust. Government needs to provide basic amenities that Nigerians need. try to bring down the cost of basic living, and people will be propelled or enticed to pay taxes. There has to be also a reward system. Let's improve digitization. You know, if, for example, if I live in the US or Canada right now, if I want to pay my taxes, I can pay it on my own. I can just go online, go to a website or use an app, and it goes. But in Nigeria, the average Nigerian man feels that, oh, you want me to pay taxes? You're not transparent about the system. There's so much bureaucracy. Even when I decide I want to pay my taxes, the bureaucracy is too much. And once something starts sounding or seeming complicated, the average Nigerian feels that you can't trust it. You know, you're trying to cheat them. But if you have a very open process backed by technology, many people will pay their taxes. You know, and the government is to do well from a public trust perspective.
Okay, so I like the fact that you talked about the various issues as regards tax being paid, and the fact that you mentioned that there's a need to widen the tax net. But some people will say that it could be challenging. I mean, Nigeria's informal economy accounts for a substantial, basically the highest portion of the Nigerian markets. That particular portion of the market is not documented. We don't have quality data. So even if we say we want to optimize it technologically, we don't even have the data to drive that conversation. So is that another shortfall on the part of government that you expect, of course, something to be done in that regards?
Exactly. I expect that informal sector to be properly managed. It's unfortunate that about over 50% of our GDP in Nigeria comes from the informal sector. And that informal group is hardly ever taxed. They don't pay taxes. You know, data is really lacking, but like I mentioned earlier, you will need to entice the informal sector. Imagine an economy where maybe before you provide basic services like free transportation or subsidized transportation, or maybe healthcare, free healthcare, you ask this beneficiaries to show their tax cards or evidence of tax payments. And all of this can be unified. That's how we said that, oh, we don't have data, but BVN came in. You can use BVN, you can use the NIN to track tax payments. It's not that complicated. I think that the days that we could say these are very difficult to achieve are behind us. Everyone that has a bank account today in Nigeria has a BVN. And almost everyone that has a BVN also has a NIN. So we can use these unique personal identifiable information to also drive our tax reforms.
Okay.
We can. That sector really, really needs reorganization. I agree. Many small businesses are not even registered. Many transactions are still under the table using cash. So how do you track this? These small businesses or individuals don't have record trails, no paperwork, but the government can start to say, okay, before we give you handouts or incentives or cash transfer schemes, we need to see that you have a tax ID. We need to be able to pull up the records and see when last you paid your taxes. It can even be a flat amount. Imagine if 10 million people pay a flat amount of 10,000 for taxes in a year. There'll be more funds, be able to generate more money locally.
All right, that's well said. Now, an alternative to revenue generation is the asset optimization. Now, we got news of the rumor with the Enugu International Airport, but then the questions that people would ask is that which assets do you think that government should be looking at? Under what criteria? And should it be selling, leasing, revamping, partnership? All right. So those are the things we're going to look at. So, Kizito, I'd like you to stay with us for a while. We go on a very short break, and when we return, I'll take your reaction on that. And of course, you're watching Business Edge. We have been talking about what the finance minister said a couple of days ago. He said that Nigeria will be moving away from concession loans from international institutions and will be looking at domestic asset mobilization avenues, so to speak. I mean, tax reforms, asset optimization, and all that. And I'm asking my guests this morning, what are the issues with this new shift by the Nigerian government, and what can be achieved in terms of these revenue mobilization efforts of government? Of course, I've been talking to Kizito Okpewolo, who's the special advisor to the Edo State Governor on Finance, Investment, and Revenue. Thank you so much for your patience, Kizito, on the show.
Thank you.
So before we went on that break, I was asking you about how the asset optimization part for revenue mobilization will, pull through. How do you think that would happen? Are we looking at probably selling, leasing, revamping, or partnership? How can the government make the best of this particular part if it's hoping to generate revenue from it?
Oh, thank you very much. So there are various options, you have mentioned selling, leasing, joint ventures, public-private partnerships. A lot could be done. It depends. There's no one size that fits all. It depends on the asset, the scenario, and first with proper analysis, then you decide what the best case scenario is. In Edo State, we're also revamping our public-private partnership office. A bill is there with the State House of Assembly that has passed its second reading, and we're looking at those options. We also know we have state assets, and will we allow these assets to lie fallow, or will we allow these assets to continue to underperform? Because we know that government is not the best businessman. Our business is not to be in business as a government. If we have to involve the private sector, then we'll drive that. And that's one of the things we were preaching at the World Bank IMF spring meetings. We went there not to seek for concessional funding or debt equity. We went there to seek for partners that could come and collaborate with us. Agriculture is there. We have land. Our huge asset is land. One of the best assets, or the low-hanging fruits we have assets in Edo State or in Nigeria is land. We can invite private sector players to come, not just foreign direct investors we're looking at, even locally, investors that can play, So we can also go into business with these people saying, okay, we set up an SPV, and the government owns maybe 49%, private sector owns 51%. That is building investors' confidence. We don't want to say we're in business with private sector and we have controlling stakes. No. Private sector should drive it for us. We're there to monitor and to regulate. When you talk about companies not doing well, there are a lot of them. I don't want to mention so I don't get into trouble, at the national level. But if you give most of our assets, to the private sector, you can watch what will happen within a year or two. To turn it around, private businesses are doing well. I had a glance at BUA's report recently.
Okay.
And I was amazed at the growth.
Well, so I'm actually having an issue with the private sector and how transformation can come, most especially government assets now that are being privatized. I mean, we can talk about NITEL, talk about the power sector and some other government state-owned, initiatives or agencies. Now, some of them, let me not say most of them, some of them have not really, turned around the fortunes after they have been privatized. So I will be so sure that if this asset optimization comes into play, they will be able to channel the funds that the government will need, probably for budget and expenditure.
Okay. I also want you to look at it on the brighter side.
Okay.
There have been some great successes as well. Look at LMA Petrochemical. What's the success story? It was privatized, sold to the right investors. And from what I heard, one expert was telling me the other day, he said the dividend that we get from that sale was much more than what Nigeria was even earning from that entity before it was privatized. I understand you had some concerns with some field privatization deals like NITEL and the rest of them, but again, I did not follow the sale of NITEL. I don't know if they were sold to the right investor. I know that around that period, we heard stories that It was sold to a briefcase investment firm. Was due diligence really followed? Yes, I don't know, but we can get it right. Learning from our past mistakes, when we have seen that some organizations or companies were privatized and they failed. So I think right now, if we're going to embark on privatization, we would have learned from our lessons. The world is watching Nigeria. The privatization process has to be transparent.
All right, so I understand your standpoint.
To do with due diligence,
of course,
not with personal relationships. Yeah,
of course,
and we can get it. We can reduce it.
Okay. Yeah, and echoing your optimism, the finance minister said that Nigeria is looking at a projected growth, a GDP projected growth of about 7%. But IMF is saying that by 2025, it's projecting 3% and 2.7% in 2026. So with all that you have said, and with the realities on ground, even if you're not able to make 7% of GDP growth, what percentage do you think we can make? Or how optimistic are you that we can see accelerated growth this year and in the next?
I wouldn't like to attach a figure to it. 7% is quite ambitious, but is realistic. I'm very optimistic that there will be accelerated growth by 2025, by the end of 2025, 2026. I'm confident in what the minister said. We're not borrowing much. We are saving money. We are channeling money now into the right direction, attracting foreign and local investments. We are able to use funds to create infrastructure. If you can deploy a lot of that into infrastructural development, it will attract investment. And we're trying to create more employment for our people, and we're also going to see if we can take advantage of this African continental free trade area.
Okay.
If that kicks up and is implemented, is a huge potential for Nigeria. Intra-African trade is going to boost, Nigerian economy. We have the numbers. We need. Some of us just need the market. Some of our businesses. So domestic production is going to increase. Things are taking shape. I will say they're painful right now, but we'll get there. Oil production has been stable, and if we're able to block those leakages in the oil sector, with some reforms, we make sure that the adequate security is provided, in the oil producing areas. And if the prices of oil prices remain stable or increases, then we are good.
Okay.
We're good. Again, anything could happen. Let's from a Nigerian perspective, we can control some factors, but we can't control.
Yes, global headwinds and all.
Like global recession and stuff like that.
Well, we are hoping that, as government moves away from commercial funding and focuses on its domestic and regional strengths, including partnership with the private sector, we can, record some bit of appreciable growth in the economy, probably in the next few months. So looking into the end of the year, probably next year. So we are hopeful of that. Kizito Okwewolo, Special Advisor to the Edo State Governor on Finance, Investments, and Revenue. Thank you so much for sharing your profound knowledge with us.